Yeah, when we have more time, we say it faster.
Well, that makes
Carrie,
sense.
who is on the show today, Carrie?
Here, are you going to interrupt me, or do I actually get to tell everyone?
No, you can try. Ready, go.
David Litt, the New York Times bestselling author of Thanks, Obama, and his latest book, Democracy in One Book or Less. And he wrote the monologues for some of the most amazing White House Correspondents' Dinner speeches ever. Oh, he was a former presidential speechwriter for Obama. We also have brentalfloss, Brent Black, who's a game show host and an amazing YouTube creator. So we have a pretty epic lineup today.
I don't know where to start, except there's probably a place to. Backpack Show. Just like that. We did it.
Chloe's here from Scotland. John Harrison is here, and he is so excited.
Oh, it's John Harrison's fault that this got going. Because he tweeted Brent and said, "Hey, epic voice guy and Chris were talking about Brent," and Brent like pushed a like, and I was like, "Oh!" That's why fanboy fainted, like you do.
Yeah, I expect you to faint today. I hope somebody brought their smelling salts. Oh, John is all discombobulated because I'm on the right and Chris is on the left. I could move that if it bothers you, but Chris would be unhappy.
I'll just look the wrong way most of the show.
I'll move me. How's that? Okay.
You son of a... I didn't even know you could do that.
I aim to please.
We have things to do. I mean, David Litt's here. Democracy in One Book. I'm going to learn
or
about
less.
This. Or we don't even need that book then. We're going to learn about the Skywalker window, the Palpatine toilet, the Sith Lord closet. There's a lot of pieces of this
how
book
you write jokes for the president of the United States.
Yeah, how not to write jokes too. My gosh, that's got to be intense. All right, look, we have sponsors. We have a new sponsor today too. So the old sponsor, those old guys, StreamYard, forget them. cbrogan.me/StreamYard if you want to make a show that's even better than this show.
Love StreamYard today more than ever. Get over to cbrogan.me/StreamYard.
Get some. And we have a new sponsor for Person of the Day. We have PubSite. Carrie, what do you know about PubSite? I mean, hey, if you ever wanted to build a website.
I wanted to talk about it when we talk about the person of the day, but I'll do it now if you want me to.
I don't care. I want you to be happy, whatever.
So basically, if you want an author website or a publisher website or a book website, and it's really hard and frustrating, you're probably not using the right tool. PubSite is super easy to use website builder, and it's designed specifically for books and authors. So you can build the site yourself, or you can have the PubSite team build it for you. Either way. So whether you have one book or you're writing, like, say 9, like Chris Brogan, PubSite's a really good option for authors and small publishers. So check it out. 14-day free trial, pub-site.com.
Pub-site.com. I'll take Hemingway. That's what I'll do. That's just what I want them to make for me. I'm bringing on David Litt because that's what we have to do.
Because he's lit?
Because he's lit. He's never heard that joke. You've never heard that joke.
I'm sure it never gets old.
David Litt, how are you? And thank you for being on the show.
I'm good. I'm like 2020 good, but I'm good.
I know. That's like still alive, right? 2020 good.
It's a silly question at this point. Like,
as always, I want to close with more.
But
like we're always the same. Always terrible. So when you're writing speeches for a president of the United States and they have to be funny, I feel like you got to be really careful there because it can come off as bullying like so easily. So how did you want to walk that line and make sure you didn't accidentally offend like a whole nation or something?
It's a weird challenge because, a lot of the time in comedy, you think about punching down, right? If you're more powerful, you don't want to make fun of someone less powerful. If you're the president of the United States, there's not a lot of up to punch. So it does become a question, not so much of, are you punching up or punching down, but thinking about, number one, how do you make sure that when I was writing for President Obama, he wanted to be making jokes at his own expense as much as he's making jokes at anyone else's expense. That was important. And I think it's part of an American tradition of politicians making fun of themselves. And then also thinking about who kind of deserves it a little bit. There's plenty of powerful people in Washington who, they could stand to get made fun of.
Well, I don't know if they could stand it. That's the problem right now.
Maybe they didn't stand it as well as we thought they did, David Litt.
Yes. Well, and I think the other, you talked about offending countries and things like that. I did actually start an international incident by accident in a joke, involving a joke. And, that this was back when people paid attention to the president's words, and it was not accepted that the president would say things that were outrageously inflammatory every day. So one small thing could, cause a whole firestorm. But that was, I learned the hard way that when you're in the White House, the stakes are very high, even if you're just writing jokes.
Now I really want to know what the joke was, but I'm afraid to ask.
Yeah.
The joke actually, so I'd done a bunch of jokes, and then there was the serious part at the end for journalists. And because it was in the joke speech, it didn't go through the normal fact-checking process. And President Obama said, because, it wasn't his fault, because I wrote it in there and no one was paying attention to the speech because it wasn't that important, journalists have risked everything to bring us stories from places like Syria and Kenya. And I put Kenya in there just because it ends in ya and Syria ends in ya. So I was like, ooh, this sounds good. That's why they pay me the big bucks as a speechwriter. When the Kenyan government saw that they were in the same sentence as Syria, they were extremely upset about this. And, later I told this story and someone who was in Kenya at the time, he said, yeah, I remember that, it was like the story for days. The only thing you got wrong when you tell that story is you didn't emphasize just how bad it was. I was like, oh, okay, good. And I remember they called on America to apologize. And I was like, well, maybe I could just apologize, but that's not how that works.
Yeah, no, we all had to do it. We all had to get in line. Carol Elliot's joining. She wants to know, did you write the anger translator bit and the buck list one?
Those were both from 2015. That was a really fun correspondence dinner because everything was going pretty well for the Obama White House at that time. He kind of had some swagger back after a midterm election that had gone really poorly. So we did bring in Keegan-Michael Key to play Luther, Obama's anger translator. A bunch of us worked on the script and, punched it up and all of that. What was really fun about that was I got to watch the president and Keegan rehearse in the White House. And anytime Keegan, had one of these lines yelling about how much shit America put Obama through, the president just lost it. He could not stop laughing. So to be back behind the scenes watching the president try and utterly fail to keep a straight face was just great. And then the bucket list joke, which was, I'm going to try to do it very quickly. He said, my advisors asked me, Mr. President, do you have a bucket list? And I said, no, but I have something that rhymes with bucket list. And then he went through all of his accomplishments and was like, take action on climate change. Bucket, why not? And that was not my joke. That was a friend of mine, Andrew Law, who I think at the time was a writer for Seth Meyers. And, we had all kinds of people pitch jokes for the president. So a lot of my job was to curate and collect jokes, not just to write myself. And that was a great one. I love that joke.
My question, John says, by the way, I miss the days when offending Kenya in a speech was the biggest news feature.
Simpler times, John.
Maybe it'll happen again. So people here, there's a lot of business people here, and they're always looking at how do they improve their own creativity? How do they work on things like jokes? So as we get ready to talk to you about your Democracy in One Book or Less, what's the value of humor in writing important business stuff? And what do you think, how's a normal way that you approach taking something that might otherwise be dry and making some interest out of it?
So let me start with what the value of humor isn't. A lot of the time, people who are important for all kinds of reasons, they're giving a speech and they're like, I want to be funny. You probably don't, right? Unless you're a funny person naturally, it's okay to not be funny. So a lot of the time you see, CEOs or other important figures, they take a big swing, they try to sound like a comedian. It doesn't work. What is important is warmth, right? Getting people to laugh is a way of getting people to just nod a little bit. It's they agree with you even before you start saying what you're saying. And it's a way of getting everyone on the same page and getting in front of your audience and making a human connection before you try to persuade them or inspire them or do whatever else you're trying to do. So that's one value of humor. It doesn't have to be hilarious, but it just has to be warm and opening. And then the other thing humor can do, we all think about when you're in the audience. You're in the audience right now, so this is not difficult. You have an attention span, which may be rapidly waning as I talk. But if I can get you to laugh, it kind of resets that clock because now you're participating. So usually, you want a laugh line in there every 7 minutes or so at a minimum, or an applause line, but just something that keeps the audience engaged so that it feels participatory rather than just you're being monologued at.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with New York Times bestselling author David Litt, author of Thanks Obama and Democracy in One Book or Less. He's a former speechwriter for President Obama. And he's super funny, in case you couldn't tell.
It looks really nice in a suit. So
Yes, this is the first interview I've done with wedding pictures. I like that.
Oh,
see, we're not like other guys, David. That's what we try to tell people. But it's talk to us a little bit now about the book, though. This, not your first book at this point. We're doing Democracy in One Book or Less. What makes you decide that's the next one? Like, I mean, you kind of ride on the last book in some ways because everyone was so in love with you. But, when you go out to your sophomore album, it's a tricky deal.
It is a tricky deal. And so I decided after writing a sort of funny, lighthearted memoir about the times I embarrassed myself in front of the president, I want to write a deep dive explaining as much political science as I possibly can, which was not necessarily a logical fit. It's one of those things I only did it afterward, and people were like, that didn't make sense. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess it didn't. That's kind of cool. And the reason is when I was in the White House, and then over the last couple of years as I've been watching this new White House, we are facing this basic problem in America, which is that most of us don't think that our representative government represents us. And it's not just Democrats like me. Also, Republicans don't feel that way. Independents don't feel that way. And so I had this realization that I don't really understand how our system of government works, even though I've worked in the White House, even though I, know all the words to Schoolhouse Rock. So I started to actually learn this stuff and try to figure out, how does voting work? Who gets to vote? Who doesn't get to vote? How much does your vote count versus my vote? Even if we both get a vote, those might not be equally powerful. How is campaign finance? What about the judges? How does the Senate work? And I tried to put all of this in a book that someone like me would read. There's really thick, important books that I have not read because they're too dense and they would hurt too much if they fell on my foot. And this is not that kind of book. I mean, this is a kind of book for someone who likes books and likes, I hope, well-written books, but also wants to understand, here's how we got into this mess, and here's how we get out.
How does that translate in these times? How does this book, I mean, obviously we need this book, but how does it get into the right hands and ears? And what was the process like for you for the launch and all that?
So it was interesting because the book came out June 16th. So launching a book in the middle of a pandemic is certainly not ideal. But on the other hand, we're seeing these moments where, if anything, I kind of wish the book was less relevant. So as an example, in June, when the book came out, that was still when these protests were happening all over the country after George Floyd's murder. And one of the things that you have to understand if you want to understand both the outrage and the movement against systemic racism in America right now is that too many Black and brown Americans, their voting rights are being targeted. And in a way that was not the case when I was a kid. And so I had written about that in a lot of different contexts in the book, where in many cases, one of the reasons people are in the streets and marching and are so angry is because you can't make change the old-fashioned democratic way because voting rights are under attack. And so in the book, I'm going through exactly why and how voting rights are under attack, and more importantly, how we can fix it. It's actually not that hard to fix it. We just have to do it. And so you look at each of these issues. I mean, you look at, President Trump right now, he's attacking the mail because he thinks it will help him win an election. Election administration is something I wrote about in the book, and I never thought it would be like, this would be the election administration election, right? How we manage our elections. But this basic question of, can we have enough polling places? Can we figure out how to make sure the mail gets there on time? These are questions that are now fundamental to our democracy. So if I ever write another book, I'd rather not launch it during a pandemic. That would be
sure. Ideally.
Ideally.
But isn't it perplexing to think that they're stymieing voting? I mean, it's not like you can tell what's on the inside of the envelope, right? So if you're not sending ballots, Republican ballots, Democrat ballots, they're all going the same place, the bin.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things about the president is he is very he kind of goes by whim, right? He doesn't really think through a lot of political decisions. What happens is, in this case, Democrats went out and said, vote by mail. Mail's important. You don't want to put yourself or your community at risk in a pandemic. Everyone vote by mail. And so the president and I think some conservatives heard that and said, oh, Democrats like vote by mail. We don't like it. And that's actually in many ways the history of America. So, I'm actually recording this from New Jersey. In 1807, women could vote in New Jersey, but they started all voting for one side, and so the other side took their voting rights away. You see this happen it's happened with African American voters throughout American history. It's happened with naturalized citizens, recent immigrants. As they became more and more democratic, Republicans backed away from supporting immigration rights and immigration reform. And so the history of America, to some extent, is the moment something gets associated with one party, the other party just is against it. And that just happened really quickly with mail-in voting.
David, we have a really important and heavy hitting question from Carol, because one of the things we do in the Backpack Show is bring the audience into the show for their questions and comments. She wants to know, how far off are the depictions of Sam and Toby from The West Wing?
Well, as you can see, since I look exactly like Rob Lowe, they got that perfectly right.
Nailed it.
Yep. They had to tone it down a little bit for him, but I appreciate that. Here's what I would say about The West Wing. And I loved The West Wing, like I think any good liberal. I went to college and was kind of raised on that show. I remember watching it with like my college Democrat friends. The real West Wing, first of all, is so much smaller than the West Wing on the show. So they're doing the walk and talk all the time. There's no room for a walk and talk in the West Wing. The West Wing used to be a stables. It was last renovated in 1952. I remember there was like a while where the basement, which is where the chief speechwriter's office was, like, kind of smelled a little bit like they had a sewage problem. Nothing about it was terribly grand, except for the Oval Office and the people who worked there. So that was one thing. The other thing is, I was not Sam or Toby on the West Wing. I was like, there were so many more people, right? I was one of the characters that you wouldn't even see because I worked for the person who handed a piece of paper to Sam or Toby and then walked off. And so in some ways, you're dramatizing it. You have to have just a core group. But one of the things that I thought was fascinating about the White House when I worked there is there's at least 1,000 people working for the executive office of the president. And all of them are trying to do just their little bit of their job well enough to make the entire thing work. And I think in that way, it's like so many other enterprises.
We have a couple of other comments. Deb Lee appreciates the Schoolhouse Rock reference. I noticed that as well. Blast from the past. John Harrison says, book safety in the home. Chapter 1, conduct a risk assessment by dropping a tome on your toe. Now on Disney Plus.
Now on Disney Plus.
Ebooks are harder to judge. That is one challenge of e-reading, but I don't have a solution there.
So for those watching who are both nerds and also concerned about our democracy, the Skywalker window, quick explanation of the Skywalker window and its significance.
I'll keep it quick. So the old version of change in Washington was things take years or decades and both sides kind of come together and work out a careful compromise. And that might be great, but it doesn't happen anymore. The way change works now is like the end of episode 4. So you've got Luke Skywalker. He is headed toward the Death Star. And there's a tiny little opening. But if you make your shot in the right moment, in the right way, it changes everything really quickly. And so when I think about a Skywalker window in politics, to me, that looks like, theoretically, if next January one party controls the House, the Senate, and the White House, and they can actually make laws, it's my argument for saying you got to do a lot very quickly. And you don't necessarily want to reach out all the time and think about how do we do this perfectly, because it's so hard to do anything. It's better to do it first and then figure out how to scale it back and how to change it.
So don't wait around for a perfect consensus because you'll never have it.
That's exactly right.
Got it.
Won't they have a Skywalker window too, though? I'm sorry, the other way around. So if you've got the other party in power, then they have a Skywalker window and they just change everything back.
They can, although one of the things that we tend to see is that a lot of the stuff that Democrats have been trying to do recently ends up being popular. Obamacare is a perfect example, right? Republicans had a Skywalker window in 2017. They said, finally, we're going to get rid of Obamacare. Then they realized, hey, wait a second, people really like having coverage for their pre-existing conditions. And so it's actually a lot harder to make regressive change than they thought. It doesn't mean they also got a lot of stuff done, unfortunately, in my opinion. But a lot of these things, they do end up sticking. Medicare was that way. Social Security was that way. In general, the bias in American society is against big changes. So if you make a big change, then it becomes the new status quo, and it does tend to stick.
Progress over perfection, says Deb, and Michelle says go big first.
Agreed.
All right, one last question, and then I have to say goodbye for a brief moment. Like I said, if you can stick around, do so for the panel. Scott had the question. I know that's not it, but don't make me come over there. What's the career path to becoming a president's speechwriter? Asked Coach Scott.
there's no one career path for it. The things that all the speechwriters that I know had in common were, number one, they read everything, not just speeches, but like if it's written down, if it's the ingredients on a cereal box, they'll read it. So curiosity in that way and just loving to read. And then the second thing is work somewhere where there's too much writing to be done. Usually a political campaign, but it can be somewhere in politics or government. And if there's too much writing to be done, every speechwriter I know got their start because someone else was overworked and said, hey, I don't want to do this. So sure, I'll let the intern take a crack at it over the weekend, or I'll let this person whose job it is, their job isn't speechwriter, but they want to do this and I certainly don't have time for it. So let's see if they can do it and not mess it up. And then that, suddenly you're a speechwriter.
So put yourself in the way of opportunity.
Exactly.
And use the DFIU method of getting to the next level. Awesome. David Litt, thank you so much. Stick around if you can. So glad to have you on the show. We've shared your links about 85 bazillion times. I have this feeling Fauzia didn't show up at the beginning. So I have a feeling she didn't hear us say all kinds of good things about pub-site.com.
I'll say them again when we pick our person of the day at the end.
Yeah, we could do that. We could, because we have a new sponsor today that Fauzia wasn't here to see because she was probably making coffee or had a meeting or something, or
she was promoting up and coming authors is what she was doing.
Probably stupid authors.
And on the Backpack Show, we're all about elevating voices and bringing you insights from unusual places.
That's what. Yes. Did you say that? That's really good.
I did.
You know who we have to bring on now is Brent Black. brentalfloss to those people who know him, which is me and John. A lot of nice words back to David, but we'll
Scott, don't stack that deck like that.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't
be that guy.
He's a speechwriter. He can come up with something to put in the backpack. He's got all the time we talk to Brent. So
that's right. Hi, Brent.
Hello.
How the heck are you? Thanks for being here, Brent Black.
Oh, it's a total pleasure. I'm okay. This is
Oh no, Brent is frozen.
Oh no.
Brent. If you want to see Brent when he's not frozen, he's on YouTube and Twitter at brentalfloss. Okay, now he's unfrozen again. I'm going to put him back. Okay.
Oh no. Better?
Yes. Yeah. Close all the things. Oh no, he's frozen again.
Here's what I'm going to do while we mess with that again, because my life's good. I'm going to.
If you have to be frozen, that's actually not a bad face to be making.
Not the worst frozen face we've ever seen, but
yeah,
I'm just not going to sing the song. This is some of what Brent used to do.
Here we go. Tell y'all a story about a cave. Story about a robot rolling with a whole lot of bravery. Meets bunny people in the cave. The doctor's got a whim to put the people into slavery. Everybody's stuck inside a cave. Can't escape the island, world's smallest violin. So much is happening today. Nobody is smiling. Things are getting violent.
So I'll probably get copyright struck because I do these days. That's my new way to be.
Well, Brent's not going to come after you. He's going to grab another rig and he'll be right back. So
no, but yeah, I saw that he's going to grab the emergency Cat 5. How funny the timing on that. He told us he has an emergency Cat 5
Fazia says,
cable.
Thank you. Points out that it's pretty early where she is.
John we'll start the show again.
Brent broke the internet again. And Steve Garfield says, nice freeze frame. I think 10 out of 10 on Freeze Raider at Freeze Raider.
Yeah.
If you got to be frozen.
Brent looks like he's ready. I don't know. Thumbs us up if you're ready.
Let's do
it. He's probably changing the thing though.
I don't care.
He's got cable. He's live, kind of.
Hello, Brent.
He froze
Can
it
you
again.
Hear us now? Oh no.
See, you damned him.
But no, see, backstage he's fine. It's only when we bring him up front. Are you okay now? Have him grab his phone. Text him or something. How about we bring David back while we get sorted out?
Well, because then he'll be ready in 35 seconds and we'll have a show like yesterday. Wow, we had it all nailed down.
Well, Brent can just stay. Steve says it's a emergency category 5. Thank you. And 10 out of 10 from Freeze Raider from Steve. And Carol says, the 2 guests on today, the one who's followed on Twitter by Barack Obama is not David Litt. Oh, no.
Listen, though, I want to say something about
David,
that. David, you're back on screen. David,
true?
I want to say something about that. Brent and I just had a DM conversation back and forth today. And I looked again and Twitter said I wasn't following him. So I think Twitter is just really helpful with the unfollowing technology.
Did Obama unfollow you?
I'm not going to be particularly offended if I was never followed by Barack Obama, but if he unfollowed me, I think that would feel a little personal, frankly.
I'm
That would
crying
be a
now.
thing.
Well, just know that apparently Twitter will unfollow people for you, whether you want them to or not.
Randomly.
So maybe it was an accident, legitimately an accident.
I somehow don't think that he really needs to read my tweets. I think he's got something to do.
What?
I'm not going to take it too personally.
Are you saying that a former president or current president should spend less time on Twitter?
I wasn't sure about that, but I'm beginning to really change my mind on it. Maybe they should do other things than tweet.
So we have
Maybe.
Brent backstage. Brent, you can join from your phone in a pinch, and I feel like this is a pinch. So
It feels a pinch. By the way, Joanne, actually, this is related to Brent's cave story thing. I remember a cave computer game on early terminals attached to IBM 360 mainframes in 77. That, Joanna, you can find that information on a new documentary on Netflix called High Scores, where they talk through that. So look, we have a refreshed Brent. Let's try it one more time. Hello.
Okay. All right. No. Phone,
Now,
Brent. Phone.
we're leaving you all on. Nope.
But no, such a good freeze face though.
Yeah.
It's like he's practiced. That's got to be YouTube.
Very nice.
David, can you do a freeze face? I'm not going to make you actually freeze.
No, I was going to try it and it was going to be terrible. So I'm glad that you backed off at the last minute.
I think if Brent grabs his phone, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Listen, I have a totally not important question for David, though, while we're figuring this all out, because here we go again. Carol had asked a question about the West Wing, and of course, Sorkin's writing is, bar none, the most ridiculously exciting. But what's your entertainment like? You can't possibly just sit around and watch political things all the time. What's your potato chips for your brain?
The stuff I like the most is, and I think everyone also has like a quarantine list that is maybe different than their before quarantine list. Like my wife and I have rewatched almost all of the Great British Bake Off. It was just like,
yes,
pandemic, we need to do it.
You're down to the seeds and stems. It's like,
and then I'm trying to think about what I've been watching recently. We just started Succession yesterday, and I feel like that puts us way behind. Everyone was watching it, and now, of course, it's like a year later, and we're watching it. So yeah, I would say I actually don't watch a ton of political themed stuff, although I loved Veep and I loved The West Wing when it was out. In part just because I feel like if I'm watching something, I don't want it to be about the news because I get enough of that in my life. I think we all do these days. So I don't know. I'm a fan of escapism. Although, a lot of the stuff I write is still more political comedy stuff. So hopefully other people are very excited about political related entertainment, but I don't know.
Where'd the nerdery come from? Is the nerdery you, or is that like your wife's influence or something? And you're like the whole Star Wars analogies in your book. And
meant something specific, like like a hatchery, but for nerds. No, the Star Wars thing. I think the need to get it right came from my wife because she's a huge Star Wars nerd, and then the rest of it was just thinking through these things and like. One of the dangers of being a speechwriter is you think in analogies all the time, and most of them are bad. I hope that one is not. It seems to have stuck. But, the first draft of my book had, for every analogy that's in there, there were like 5, and the other 5 were not good. So I think, but that is like the heart of writing, I think, in general, but definitely speech writing is often just how do we connect this thing that we don't know about to a thing we do know about? And, there's nothing we all know more about than Star Wars.
Right. Well, that's true in this room for sure. I think Brent's back. I'm going to give him a shot. Okay, Brent.
Dare
He's
to
going to make
button.
the freezy.
Just kidding. Hello. Hi. So sorry.
Wow.
Is this better?
Yes.
It is.
Oh my gosh. I am only allegedly a professional podcaster and YouTube internet video person. And I will do my best to show that that's something that I can actually do with the rest of the show. Hello. Hi.
Great material.
Thanks for filling in, David. Oh man, I'm way into politics. I love hearing about this stuff. So in the interim, I still had my AirPods in. It was great to hear. Hello. Thank you.
Well, because Brent is not just a pretty and/or singing face. He has a whole lot of projects. So I have to show you one of the projects.
Looking to liven up your party? Tired of the same old cards? Ready for a game that's as witty, creepy, or straight up filthy as you are?
Yes!
Then get ready to play Use Your Words, the party game for funny people and their unfunny friends. Grab a smart device like your phone or tablet, and in about 10 seconds, you're in the game. Add your own line to a film clip like this.
Матч рыцарей, король Александр посмел выступить против нас. Король Александр посмел выступить.
Totally voting for that one.
Use your words to make a newspaper headline.
All right, I'm closing it, but you got to know that it is a ridiculously fun game that, once your kids make you play it about 87 times, it's less fun, but it's fun.
Thanks.
So, Use Your Words, available everywhere. I have it on my Xbox, but, evidently you could get it in a lot of places. What was it like making a game show?
So there's sort of, in a way, there's sort of two things you're referring to, because the party game is game show themed, but also I did a podcast.
Then we're going to the podcast next.
Okay,
right?
just okay. So we're still
gotta
on
do
party
both.
game. Okay,
Party game.
great. Yeah. Fun fact, I've never actually been referred to as a game show host, and it's so gratifying because
You're totally
I am
a game show host now.
Well, thank you. I hope that I'm like the Alex Trebek and not the Chuck Woolery, Pat Sajak. I hope that I fall into the good camp of game show host. But yeah, no. As far as making Use Your Words, it was a moonshot. I was actually like kind of like a lot of people, a lot of millennials, like not sure what to do with my life. I lived in New York City 10 years, and like that had sapped me of. I had negative net worth plus student loans, and I was like, how do I get out of this? So I did what we all do, and I made a party game. And it was a very weird experience, but like super fun. And the making of it was kind of like a stand-up act. We would try a bunch of things. We would have people play it. We would bring them to what we called a Marty, which is a meeting, but also because it's a party game, you really want them to have a few drinks and actually play the game in the setting they would. And if something didn't work, we'd cut it. And that's kind of how we got to whatever level of good it is. That's how we got there, is just getting people sauced, seeing if they laughed, and if they didn't, cut it.
So you have something in common with David, that you're a very funny person. You create from a comedic mindset and all that, but a little different insofar as, well, I guess in a way a speechwriter does this as well, because whatever gets said is how it gets presented. But you made a party game where your humor can only carry the party so far, and the guests have to do their best to be funny.
Yeah. Figuring out how to. Okay, so early on in the process, to your point, I was like, what if we call it the party game for funny people and their unfunny friends? And my partner Julian was like, yeah, great. And so about 10% of the work was spent making a party game for funny people. And the rest of it was trying to make sure that grandma is not too intimidated by having to be funny. And also that it seems really alluring to be funny. And it's sort of just all psychological tricks to make people think that they're good enough, and then to write setups to jokes that are so universal that they can answer it easily, but that not everyone's going to have the same answer. So it really is just trial and error. And we wrote probably 4 or 5 times the amount of material we kept. And if enough people just kind of scratch their heads at a prompt, you're like, well, I really thought that one was funny, but you got to just let it go. So yeah, it was reverse comedy, but I learned informative and disturbing things about the nature of comedy. I thought comedy was universal, big U universal. And it turns out, depending on what group you're playing with, what's funny, really, really is flexible.
Kara says they're frozen. We'll get that fixed. Oh, wow.
That's weird.
No, he's not frozen to me.
Can we make if we make a banner, they're going to still think we're frozen. Deb asked
Maybe
if we
it's
were
just
frozen
in
too.
Scotland.
No, because Deb asked it here too. Is everyone frozen? Why are we having this day? I just made fun of someone else's video show because it was broken. That's why we're
Maybe
having this day.
Facebook. Then I blame Facebook. That would make sense.
Is this that Brady Bunch episode where I found the tiki guy and now I'm in trouble?
Yes.
Deep cut.
That's what you go for on here. We do that. We throw in song lyrics that other people won't know. There's
Do we do that?
We do. It's amazing. But and that's where I was going to go. Now we're all back now, says Kara, who's in Scotland, by the way. So could still be her.
Okay.
Could still be her. Like, let's let it. It's probably what Kara did.
Stop
All
it.
right. But listen, related to that and not related to the video game, and I am known for something so much so that we actually made a graphic of a 90-degree segue. I want to play just a tiny bite more of brentalfloss's old career before making party games to get out of Hawk. So hang on one second.
And I'm here to ask you a question.
Won't you come on down to Rapture? Jam a needle in your arm. It'll slowly corrode your genetical code, but it's all part of the charm. So you're a gross abomination, but
You know, it's a great game, BioShock. It's one of the classics. The problem, if you don't know brentalfloss already, the problem is that when you listen to a brentalfloss version of a song inside a video game that you played a lot, like Super Mario or Dr. Mario or some of the others, you will forever, until you're dead, sing his lyrics out of context, just randomly to strangers and everybody else. Or maybe that's just me.
That's the goal. I really like to be kind of like a brain infection with you always. But thanks for saying that, Chris. I appreciate it. I catchiness and hookiness is kind of like it's my personal drug of choice. So if I can have other people get a thing stuck in their head that I was a part of, it's like among the more spiritually gratifying things for whatever reason.
The process must be interesting, but the where I wanted to go was in relations to also, David started a war with Kenya. I was curious whether or not, you got any good wars with Japan?
No, but I definitely related, David, when you were talking about the rhythm, the Syria, Kenya. Like, I get it sometimes. And the thing is, I look back on jokes I wrote 5-10 years ago and I'm like, well, it rhymed, but shit, doesn't really age well. Sometimes it's just in the moment, it just works. Comedy is so much about rhythm. There's a Neil Simon play about when he wrote for the old show, Sid Caesar's Show of Shows. It's like a fictionalized version of that. And the writer's room is arguing about this scene they're doing in ancient Rome. And it's like, they go near the Parthenon. And they're like, no. 5 blocks from the Parthenon. Like, that's little things like that, like and of course, that's not the best joke ever written, but it gives you an idea of how, and I'm sure, God, I'm telling David, if I'm mentioning to David, this is stuff he knows better than me, but just sometimes that tweak rhythmically or word choice takes something from a detail to a joke.
Can I jump in with a comedy right here? So one of my, first of all, what's the name of that Neil Simon play?
Laughter on the 23rd Floor. And there's a character based on myths and like it's definitely worth a read.
Oh, darn.
Uh-oh. Am I still with you?
You're breaking up a little bit, here. Brent. Oh, now it's catching. It's catching.
Just trying to make sure I'm not frozen.
I think we're doing a lot of things and it's costing us some bandwidth.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm. Well, if Chris is frozen, he's got a really good frozen face we had for a second. Wow.
David seems to be unfrozen.
I'm unfrozen? To me. I was just making faces.
Good. People would think we did this on purpose to be funny because you're both really funny, but we didn't. It just is happening too much.
All right. Can I tell my...
David was going to say.
Yes.
So this is now way too much wind up for this story. So Groucho Marx and the Marx Brothers, when they were a stage act, they would go through the country and they would just change one word in the joke every night because it would before they got to New York, because they knew, right, like the difference between near or 5 blocks from can make or break a joke. And so they would test every single night and they just make like a tiny little word change and it would be the different, life or death for a joke. So it is like joke writing. I always say this to anybody who wants to write, even if you don't want to write jokes, try writing some jokes because it has to be so precise that if you can write good jokes, you can write well in general.
Yeah. And what was so weird about making a game where you provide setups and normal people provide punchlines is the same thing applies. You can be like, I think there's something in this. There's something, somebody can come up with a funny name for a Netflix documentary. I just have to give them the diving board. And, like changing a the to, something very similar just makes it work all of a sudden, whatever. It's weird.
It's got to be a giant thing. Listen, we have a couple things we got to do before we move on. I have a couple more panel questions for you, but we have a person of the day, which is sponsored by PubSite, pub-site.com.
Yes, indeed. So if you need an author website or a book website or a publishing website, pub-site.com. It's easy, and you can even have other people build it for you if you want. So 14-day free trial.
I couldn't pick anybody besides John Harrison because it's his dumb fault that Brent got on here. I mean, I wish I could say that, Keegan-Michael Key dragged David on, but John's going to be the winner because, he brought us onto the scenario. So that is our person of the day.
John's a good guy. We interact on Twitter quite a bit, so I'm delighted for him to be the conduit.
He is, he wrote a book on video games. For about a minute, I was going to write a book on video games until I realized that there was this survey done of British CEOs, and out of 119 of them, 116 of them said they detested video games. And I was like, well, what I don't want to use for an analogy.
That's an awful lot of emotional energy to invest in.
A massive percentage of people say they don't like my analogy. I'm going to write a whole book around that analogy. So that book went in the toilet. So John's book is still the book on business and crossing video games. So there you go. Merry Christopher Miss. All right. I have one panel question, and that is just this. People who are learning to express themselves tend to fall prey to fear. So not unlike the near the Coliseum and 5 blocks from the Coliseum, we tend to put a little bit too much shellac on ourselves. How do you break out of that, Brent or David, and then the opposite?
David, you want to go or should I hop in?
Why don't you go for it?
I'm sort of like a multidisciplinary, like polyglot, but not across the board, just within artsy stuff. And I got to tell you, I just juggle what I'm currently scared of doing and try to distract myself. But in general, I would say if somebody's afraid of one particular aspect of doing something creative or speaking or writing or whatever, do a different part of it. Or honestly, if you're I can't do group improv. I can sit on a stage and work the crowd for an hour with a couple of songs that go in between. And it's not Don Rickles, but I keep the fun going. You add one more person, and now we're doing a scene, and I'm like, yes, and, I got nothing. So what do? Well, I'm very afraid of group improv, so I don't do it. And I don't know if the moral of the story is don't follow the dream that scares you, because that sounds like very anti-inspirational, but it's like, there's other stuff you can do in the world you want to be in that's not the thing that makes you really afraid. You could also go out and face your fear, but if you don't really want to be a stand-up comedian, bombing can ruin you for the rest of your life. I don't know. I would just say there's a place for you in the thing you want to do. It might not be the exact part of it you want to do, but keep looking and try a different tactic, and don't punish yourself for being afraid of it, because everyone's a different musical instrument. And, you can be a clarinet, and if you beat yourself up for not being a trumpet, you're really not being constructive, but you could be a badass clarinet. You just have to accept that you're a woodwind.
So,
David, are you a woodwind?
This is triggering for me because I almost failed 8th grade clarinet. I almost had the only reason I didn't fail was because the woodwind instructor realized that if I had to repeat it, he would see me again the next year. So they minus and send me on my way. That was the end of my musical career. But what I would say, to me, I think, and Brent, I think you were touching on this a lot, is if something scares you, first of all, I think that's a very good point. You don't have to do it, and that's important, and that's not a bad thing. But if you are diving into it, and I think about this as a writer, like I'm scared of writing, and I write all the time. And the thing that I always need to do at first is just give myself permission to be bad, because there's the person we all have in our head was like, I'm incredibly funny, I'm brilliant, whatever analogy I come up with is going to be fantastic, whatever the thing is. And then I start to write and I realize that I am a human being, which is very disappointing. And there needs to be that moment when you put something on the page and you give yourself permission to say, this is going to be terrible. If you want to get into stand-up comedy, I mean, I know great stand-ups, but none of them were great when they started, right? So you have to give yourself permission to be bad and say, this will be good, but for now it's bad, and that's okay. And once you do that, you can A, get going, and B, I think it liberates you a little bit. And sometimes the work you do is better than it would be if you were trying to get it exactly right the first time.
If you're gonna
That's great
bomb, just
advice. bomb
big.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Bomb
Me of a teacher of mine used to say, you have to write the bad version first, unfortunately. And I think that's a great point. I think I took the question a little bit different, but you're absolutely right, David. And I think if you're not at all scared of what you're writing, that actually might be correlated with less good writing, because you're being a tiny bit out of your depth. There's a great David Bowie quote. Like, if you're a tiny bit out of your depth, you might in fact be much more interesting and exciting than someone so comfortable that you're just cranking out the same sausage every day.
Yeah.
My guitar instructor keeps giving me harder and harder things. He says, if you sound good while you're practicing, I'm not doing my job.
Hey, nice. That's good. A good analogy.
It's great for my kids. Love it.
I believe it was Streisand who said that somewhere there's a place for us. Out there, a place for us. I think that's what
We've reached
you
that
were
point in
saying
the
earlier.
program, ladies and gentlemen.
There's a place for you to do the things you want to do, just not on a microphone. Just go over there. You could do your thing. All right. We have, Kara says there's fear of failure, but there's also a huge gap between that and playing it safe. And maybe that's where intuition comes into play. Ooh. So you're not 100% sure you're going to fail, but you're not playing it safe. And that's where you have to kind of do your operations. All right. We've come to this part of the show. This is the question of why is this not going live?
I didn't touch it.
I'm pushing the button over and over again and nothing's happening.
Maybe it doesn't like you because it knows it's my job to push the buttons.
Did you just push the backpack button?
Nope.
I'm seeing it. What goes in your backpack?
That's the question. What? I'm going to bed and I'm going to wake up again. It's kind of work. All right. So the question
Everything
about what
is
goes in
shifting.
your backpack. Everything worked, and I made fun of another guy. Karma's a bitch. That's all I know about that. So listen, the idea is that we're building on sort of unsteady ground. It's all shifting sands down below our feet. We can't really put a foundation. We really can only carry so many things with us at any given time. What's one thing, metaphorical or physical, that goes into someone's backpack to be successful over the next 5 years?
Oh, but not ours specifically, or just
your backpack. But, recommend that this should also go in their backpack, because if you put like your meds, then it's not going to help anyone.
You're in alphabetical order, so you're up.
I think I can just jump in real quick, and it just happens to be right by my laptop. So this is the Comprehensive American Rhyming Dictionary, and it's pretty hefty. And the thing is, I've had a copy of this. Is my second copy of this for, 15 or 16 years. I am mostly a songwriter, lyricist by trade, and then branch off from there. But I think why this applies not just to me. First off, I have gone on many trips where this is the only other thing besides the bare bones, like clothes, laptop, wallet, and just in case, you got to have that rhyming dictionary. But I think that as a metaphor for others, it's like, don't be afraid to accept the help that exists. I was talking to a friend of mine who's having panic attacks, and I've been on anxiety meds. Now I know we're not talking, meds is itself a big topic, but it's like there is assistance in a lot of different ways. There are online tutorials for things. There are people to talk to, people in your life. You can Google, if you just can't think of a rhyme, maybe there's something that can help you. Don't try to do it all yourself, because it doesn't actually. People are not going to think you're stronger just because you're good. And, okay, falling apart this analogy, but rhyming dictionaries, this show is brought to you by the
Friends
Comprehensive American Rhyming. Anyway.
Cara says it's a heavy thing to put in your backpack. And you know what? It's a heavy thing to drop on your foot.
It is, but don't try to do everything yourself. Take help. And if somebody's written a rhyming dictionary that can give you a rhyme you hadn't thought of, don't feel like you have to rely just on the things in your own brain.
David.
And ever since you held that up, I was just rhyming with quince. I was like, evince.
Stop it.
Convince. So,
You're not helping.
David, what goes in the backpack?
I think that's so smart because I think a lot of people assume that like if you don't do it all yourself, you're cheating, and and instead it's like no, the people who are the best at anything they know how to find the help that they need, and that's huge. It's like a thing that I feel like they don't teach you when you're a kid, but you just taught everybody now, so that's good. And so the thing I would say, this is pure metaphorical or figurative, but I was going to talk about optimism because I am not an optimist by nature. I would say I'm a realist, but I think most people would probably say that means I'm a pessimist. And for me, one of the things when I wrote speeches for Obama, I noticed that no matter what the thing was, his first instinct was always, how can this be part of the solution? It was a new technology, a new trend, a new whatever. And it wasn't because he thought it was all going to turn out all right. I mean, the world is a scary place. But it was because if you orient yourself that way, at least you can be part of fixing the problems. And so I try to, even right now when there's so much bad stuff going on in the world or bad news happening, I try to start by saying, if the story ended well, how does it go, right? Like how does it look over the next 5 years? How can this be part of solving the problem? And sometimes it isn't. But to me, so optimism is less like a conditional state. And it's more of a kind of filter you have to intentionally put on, unless you're just like a naturally cheery, optimistic person. But I have no advice.
No, David, I'm not.
No, that is not Carrie. Listen, hey Chaz, good to see you here. By the way, John Harrison says that the difference between a realist and an optimist is experience.
Or where you're from. I'm from Boston, so I was like never going to be an optimist. Just the way it goes.
Yeah, Boston people are. You'll never make it. I did want to say thank you to Nancy for saying that I had a nice frozen face. So
Yeah, well, everybody did actually. Like Brent, yours were like epic frozen faces. If you have to be frozen, I recommend it. 10 out
I
of
do what
10
I
would
can.
freeze again.
I do what I can.
David's like, I'm just not going to freeze. So
Carol says that this is easily one of her top 5 backpack episodes. So even through the fire, we made it work. I try to be an optimist and remind myself that though my glass is half full or empty, depending on my mindset, I still have a glass. Well, it's half full of pee is the part they didn't tell me.
Where is that yellow card?
Get it? Go find it. It's
Save
yellow for
it.
pee yellow. That's why.
Stop it.
All right. Listen. Yeah. That's all we got to do out of here. Listen, we are sponsored, like I said, and I have to do this because, thanks for your bag of money. Appreciate it. I can now go buy some pistachios. I don't have to eat peanuts if I don't want. David Litt and Brent are just, go find them. We already gave you their links 85, 70,000 times. But I did want to remind you something that my grandmother said about writing in a political time, because when it comes